Part 1. The Death of Muhammad and the Question that Divided Islam. According to Islamic tradition, Muhammad received his first revelation after encountering the angel Gabriel. In that moment, he heard what Muslims believe to be the words of God, and those revelations became the foundation of Islam. The messages Muhammad received throughout his lifetime were later collected and compiled into the Quran. At first, Muhammad and his followers were persecuted by the ruling families of Mecca. His teaching that there was only one God directly challenged the city's deeply rooted polytheistic traditions, as well as the political and economic power built around them. Eventually, Muhammad left Mecca with his followers and traveled north to Medina. There, he built a growing religious and political community, and over time, much of the Arabian Peninsula came under Islamic rule. Muhammad was not only a religious teacher, he was also a political leader, a lawgiver, and a military commander. That is what made the question of succession so important. After his death, the issue was not simply who would guide the faithful spiritually. It was also about who would control the state, command the army, enforce the law, and lead the entire Muslim community. In the spring of 632, Muhammad was returning to Medina after completing his final pilgrimage to Mecca. More than 100,000 Muslims are said to have traveled with him. During the journey, Muhammad stopped the enormous procession, raised the hand of a man named Ali, and declared, "Whoever considers me his leader should also consider Ali his leader." Sunni and Shia Muslims have interpreted that moment in completely different ways ever since. Shia Muslims believe Muhammad was publicly appointing Ali as his successor in front of tens of thousands of witnesses. Sunni Muslims understand the statement differently. They believe Muhammad was expressing affection, trust, and support for Ali, but not formally naming him as the next leader of the Muslim community. The same event, the same words, two entirely different conclusions. Perhaps the division began in that gap between interpretation and intention. Only a few months later, Muhammad died. His death created an immediate crisis. Someone had to fill the position he left behind. And there was one man who seemed, to many people, closer to Muhammad than anyone else. That man was Ali ibn Abi Talib, the same person whose hand Muhammad had raised before the crowd. Ali was about 30 years younger than Muhammad. He had grown up in Muhammad's household from the age of 10 and had effectively been raised by him. Islamic tradition remembers Ali as the first male to accept Muhammad's message. Whenever the early Muslim community faced danger, Ali was usually at the front. During the Battle of Uhud, when many fighters fled and Muhammad was left exposed, Ali remained beside him. He was famous for his courage, his generosity, his honesty, and his loyalty. Tradition says he never lost a single one-on-one duel. When Muhammad died, Ali was beside his body. He washed him, wrapped him in burial cloth, and prepared him for burial. These were intimate duties, normally performed only by the closest members of a family. But while Ali was preparing Muhammad's body, another meeting was taking place elsewhere in Medina. Members of the local tribes had gathered at a meeting place known as Saqifa Banu Sa'ida. When Muhammad's closest companions learned that the Medinan leaders might appoint a ruler on their own, they hurried to the gathering. A heated debate followed, and in the end, Abu Bakr was chosen. Abu Bakr had been one of Muhammad's closest friends and earliest supporters. He had stood beside him from the beginning of his mission. Now, he became the first caliph. The word caliph means successor, or the one who follows the prophet in leading the community. Ali was not present when the decision was made. While he was saying farewell to his teacher and relative, the future of the Muslim world was being decided without him. When Ali's supporters heard what had happened, they were furious. The caliph was not merely the equivalent of a priest or religious scholar. He controlled the government, the military, the courts, and the political future of the entire Muslim community. In modern terms, the position combined the authority of a president, a commander-in-chief, and the highest religious leader into a single office. Ali's supporters believed that this authority should have passed to Muhammad's closest male relative. Muhammad had no surviving son, and Ali was both his cousin and his son-in-law. To them, the logic seemed obvious. Abu Bakr may have been a respected companion and a good man, but friendship and bloodline were not the same thing. Ali and the members of his household initially refused to swear allegiance to Abu Bakr. That refusal lasted for roughly 6 months, revealing that the decision had not been accepted by everyone. Ali himself was deeply angered, yet he did not draw his sword. The Muslim community was still young and fragile, and a civil war at that moment could have destroyed everything Muhammad had built. Ali chose unity over rebellion, but it took him half a year to swallow what he saw as a profound humiliation. And it did not happen only once. When the second caliph was chosen, Ali was passed over again. When the time came to select the third caliph, Ali finally appeared to have a genuine opportunity. But there was a condition. He would have to promise that he would govern according to the precedents established by the first 2 caliphs. Why was that a problem? During the administrations of Abu Bakr and Umar, the Muslim state had created a system in which financial allowances were distributed according to tribal status and the order in which people had converted to Islam. Those who had accepted Islam earlier or belonged to prominent tribes received more. Ali believed this violated Muhammad's teaching that all believers were equal before God. To promise that he would follow the previous system would have meant accepting an unequal structure he believed was fundamentally wrong. So Ali refused. Uthman, who agreed to the condition, became the third caliph. 3 times Ali had been passed over, and 3 times he had refused to start a war. He believed preserving the unity of the community was more important than claiming power for himself. But the frustration among his supporters continued to grow. During this period, the 2 emerging groups began to acquire distinct names. The majority, who emphasized Muhammad's sunnah, meaning his customary practice, as well as the consensus of the community, became known as Sunnis. The minority who supported Ali called themselves Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali. Over time, the name was shortened to Shia. The moment each side gained a name, the division became more than a temporary political disagreement. A permanent line had begun to form. But the true catastrophe had not yet arrived. Ali had endured 3 exclusions without taking up arms, yet some events could no longer be prevented by patience alone. While Ali remained on the sidelines, the third caliph, Uthman, gradually lost control of the Muslim state. After taking power, Uthman appointed members of his own Umayyad family as governors of Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and other important provinces. Public authority increasingly began to resemble family property. Government became aristocratic, and many Muslims felt that it was moving further and further away from Muhammad's original message. Anger spread across the empire. Eventually, rebels from Egypt and Iraq marched to Medina. Uthman was killed inside his own home. It was the first time a caliph had been assassinated since the Muslim community had been formed. The murder threw the entire Islamic world into chaos. And at last, the position Ali had waited for was offered to him. Local leaders in Medina, migrants, and members of the rebel factions came to Ali and asked him to become caliph. After 3 previous exclusions, he finally accepted. Once in power, Ali acted quickly. He dismissed governors he believed had been appointed through corruption and favoritism. He abolished the unequal system of financial allowances and distributed public funds equally, regardless of tribe, family status, or the date of conversion. He was trying to restore the principle Muhammad had taught, that all believers stood equal before God. Yet the very reforms intended to restore justice created new enemies. Those who had benefited from the old system now saw Ali as a threat. Among the people who rose against him was someone almost no one expected: Aisha, one of Muhammad's widows. Aisha had held enormous authority within the early Muslim community and was remembered as one of Muhammad's most beloved wives. Now, she led an army against his son-in-law. Her official demand was that the killers of Uthman be punished. Because Ali had come to power with support from some of the rebels, his opponents accused him of protecting the assassins. But beneath the public argument lay years of personal tension between Ali and Aisha. Their relationship had long been difficult, and during Muhammad's lifetime, Ali had reportedly expressed doubts during a controversy involving Aisha's reputation. Political principle, religious legitimacy, and personal resentment were now tangled together. The first civil war in Islamic history had begun. Muslims call this period the first fitna. In Arabic, fitna can mean trial, disorder, civil strife, or division. The armies met near Basra in Iraq because Aisha directed her forces. From the back of a camel, the conflict became known as the Battle of the Camel. Muhammad's widow and Muhammad's son-in-law were now commanding armies against one another. They worshipped the same God, read the same revelation, and followed the same prophet. Ali won the battle. Aisha was captured, but Ali treated her with respect and sent her safely back to Medina. There was almost no time to recover. A far more powerful enemy was already waiting. His name was Muawiyah, the governor of Syria. He was Uthman's cousin and one of the strongest members of the Umayyad clan. After Uthman's murder, Muawiyah displayed Uthman's blood-stained clothing and demanded justice. When Ali became caliph and ordered him to step down as governor, Muawiyah refused. War became inevitable. The two armies met near the Euphrates River on the plain of Siffin. Ali personally led an army of roughly 90,000 men from Iraq and Medina. Muawiyah answered with a massive Syrian force of his own. The battle gradually turned in Ali's favor. Muawiyah's troops were being pushed back, and defeat appeared to be only a matter of time. Then, Muawiyah's side made a brilliant and desperate move. His soldiers raised pages of the Quran on the tips of their spears and called out, "Let the word of God decide between us, not the sword." Ali immediately recognized the tactic. He believed Muawiyah was using the Quran as a shield to stop a battle he was about to lose. But many soldiers in Ali's army refused to continue fighting. They argued that striking people who were holding the words of God would be an act of sacrilege. The advance stopped. The moment that might have ended the war slipped away. Arbitration was proposed, and Ali reluctantly accepted. But the decision split his own followers. A radical group broke away, insisting that human arbitration had no authority in a matter that belonged to God alone. They became known as the Kharijites, meaning those who went out or separated. To them, Ali had betrayed divine judgment by accepting negotiation. The conflict now had three sides: Ali, Muawiyah, and the Kharijites. Ali eventually fought and defeated many of the Kharijites, but one of their surviving members sought revenge. In 661, while Ali was praying in the mosque of Kufa, an assassin struck him in the head with a poisoned sword. Ali survived for 2 days before dying from the wound. He was around 60 years old. For Shia Muslims, Ali's death was not merely the assassination of a ruler. He was the man whose hand Muhammad had raised before the crowd. He was the man who had endured exclusion 3 times because he feared tearing the Muslim community apart. And in the end, he was killed by members of the very community he had tried to preserve. With his death, the hope that Muhammad's own family would establish a truly just Islamic government appeared to disappear as well. Part 2, Karbala, the tragedy that changed Islam forever. Ali's eldest son, Hassan, became the next leader of his supporters. But by then, real power had shifted to Muawiyah. Rather than continue a war that would only bring more bloodshed, Hassan agreed to a peace treaty. He surrendered his claim to the caliphate under one important condition. When Muawiyah died, the next caliph would be chosen through consultation by the Muslim community, not inherited like a throne. Muawiyah never honored that agreement, and the consequences would lead to the single most tragic event in Shia history. Everything changed after Muawiyah's death. Instead of allowing the community to choose a new leader, Muawiyah simply handed the caliphate to his own son, Yazid. There was no election, no consultation, no consensus. For the first time in Islamic history, the office of the caliph became hereditary. The political system Muhammad had never intended was now beginning to resemble a monarchy. The first target of the new ruler was Hussein, Ali's younger son, and Muhammad's beloved grandson. Yazid demanded that Hussein publicly swear allegiance to him. If Hussein accepted, Yazid's rule would instantly gain religious legitimacy. But Hussein refused. Everything his father Ali had sacrificed for, everything his brother Hassan had negotiated to protect, would be erased the moment he pledged loyalty to Yazid. Accepting would mean endorsing what he believed was an unjust government. Then something unexpected happened. Letters began arriving from the Iraqi city of Kufa. Kufa had once been Ali's capital and remained the heart of his supporters. Thousands of people urged Hussein to come. "We're ready. We'll stand with you. We'll recognize you as our leader." Historical sources record that as many as 20,000 people pledged their support. Even so, Hussein remained cautious. Rather than rushing into Iraq, he first sent his cousin, Muslim ibn Aqil, to investigate the situation. When Muslim arrived in Kufa, he was welcomed enthusiastically. Crowds gathered around him. The city appeared ready to rise in Hussein's favor. Muslim wrote back immediately. "Come now," he said. "The people are waiting." But while Hussein was making the long journey toward Iraq, everything changed. Yazid appointed a new governor. His name was Ubayd Allah ibn Ziyad, a man already known for ruling through fear. The moment he entered Kufa, he gathered the people in the city's main mosque and issued a terrifying warning. Anyone who supported Hussein would be executed. Some would be crucified, others would lose everything they owned. Fear spread through the city overnight. The 20,000 supporters who had pledged loyalty began disappearing one by one. The movement collapsed before Hussein ever arrived. Muslim ibn Aqil was arrested. Soon afterward, he was executed. His final request was heartbreaking. He begged someone to send a message warning Hussein not to come, but that message never reached him. Completely unaware of what had happened, Hussein continued toward Kufa. In early October of the year 680, Hussein and his family arrived at the plain of Karbala. There, Yazid's army blocked their path. The numbers weren't even close. Across the battlefield stood at least 4,000 soldiers. Some historical records place the number as high as 35,000. On Hussein's side, there were only 72 people. It was hardly a battle at all. Yazid's commanders made the first move. Instead of attacking immediately, they cut Hussein's group off from the Euphrates River. No water, no escape. The Iraqi desert in October was brutally hot. For 3 days, Hussein's camp survived without a single drop of water. Children cried from thirst. Families watched helplessly as supplies ran out. Again and again, Yazid's commanders offered the same deal. Pledge your loyalty to Yazid, and you will live. Again and again, Hussein refused. To him, surrendering to injustice was worse than death. It was the same principle his father Ali had lived by, the same principle Muhammad had taught. On the 10th day of Muharram, the battle finally began. The outcome had never really been in doubt. One by one, Hussein's companions were killed. Family members, friends, relatives. Every person who stood beside him fell. At last, Hussein himself entered the battlefield. He fought until he was overwhelmed and killed. Then his body was mutilated. His head was severed and sent to Yazid. It was later displayed publicly in Damascus. The surviving women and children, including members of Muhammad's own family, were taken captive and marched to Yazid's court. Imagine the scene: the grandson of the Prophet, beheaded, his family paraded as prisoners, his severed head displayed before the people. Can an act like that truly be carried out in the name of Islam? Only one of Hussein's sons survived. He had been too sick to fight. Because of his illness, his life was spared. The women and children were taken as captives. On that day, Muhammad's own bloodline became spoils of war. For Shia Muslims, the 10th of Muharram is not simply the anniversary of a military defeat. It marks the day justice was crushed by political power, a wound that, in their eyes, has never healed. That day is remembered as Ashura. The word literally means the 10th. Every year, millions of Shia Muslims wear black, gather in mourning, beat their chests, and remember Hussein's sacrifice. But the remembrance doesn't end there. 40 days after Ashura comes an even larger event. It is called Arba'in. The word means 40. Pilgrims walk nearly 80 kilometers from Najaf, where Ali is buried, to Karbala, where Hussein was killed. The journey commemorates those who returned to Karbala 40 days after the massacre. The roads fill with black clothing, red flags, the sound of drums, the sound of mourning. Entire cities become rivers of people. In 2018, according to Iraqi officials, tens of millions of pilgrims from more than 40 countries participated. It is widely considered the largest annual gathering of people anywhere on Earth, larger than the Olympic Games or the FIFA World Cup final. 14 centuries have passed. So why do millions still make this journey? Because to Shia Muslims, Karbala isn't ancient history. It is a story that never truly ended. It is the story of justice standing against power, of truth refusing to bow to authority. As long as that story lives, Ashura and Arba'in will continue, But Karbala did more than leave behind grief. It permanently transformed Islam itself. From that point forward, Sunnis and Shi'as were no longer simply two groups who disagreed over succession. They became two entirely different ways of understanding faith. And nowhere is that difference clearer than in one simple word: Imam. Part 3. The split that never healed. The difference between Sunni and Shia Islam becomes even clearer when you look at one word: Imam. In Islam, an imam is someone who leads the faithful. He leads prayers, teaches the Quran, and guides the community. At first glance, both Sunnis and Shias use the same title, but the meaning couldn't be more different. For Sunnis, an imam is a respected scholar and teacher. After the Prophet Muhammad, no human can stand between God and mankind. An imam isn't infallible. He possesses no divine authority. Anyone with enough knowledge, wisdom, and moral character can become one. But for Shia Muslims, an imam is something entirely different. He is God's representative on earth, a living proof of divine guidance. According to Shia theology, every imam possesses isma, a state of divine protection from error. Just as prophets are protected from leading people astray, so are the imams. And because this authority is believed to pass only through Muhammad's bloodline, no matter how wise or righteous someone may be, they can never become an imam unless they descend from Ali. One tradition sees an imam as an exceptional teacher. The other sees him as God's appointed guide for humanity. That single difference shapes almost every aspect of how the two branches understand Islam. Even history itself is viewed through completely different lenses. For Sunnis, the period after Muhammad's death is largely a success story. The era of the first four caliphs is remembered as the golden age of Islamic leadership, a time when the community expanded rapidly, defeating the Persian Empire and spreading across North Africa. Their worldview emphasizes unity and stability. Even if rulers aren't perfect, preserving order is considered essential. For Shias, the exact same history tells the opposite story. From the moment Muhammad died, justice began to lose. Ali was passed over. Hussein was massacred. To them, history is the story of political power repeatedly crushing God's chosen leaders, which is why resistance lies at the heart of Shia identity. Standing against injustice, even at the cost of your life, isn't simply admired. It's considered an act of faith. Hussein became the ultimate symbol of that sacrifice. Many scholars argue this worldview still influences modern Iranian politics today. Its willingness to resist powerful enemies, including the United States and Israel, is often rooted not only in geopolitics, but also in centuries of religious memory shaped by Karbala. But this raises an important question. If the rightful imam is supposed to guide humanity, what happens when there is no imam? To answer that, we need to understand another cornerstone of Shia belief. According to Twelver Shia Islam, there were 12 imams. The first was Ali, the second was Hassan, the third was Hussein, who died at Karbala. Generation after generation, leadership continued through Muhammad's family, until the 12th imam. Then, sometime around 873 AD, the 12th imam disappeared. Not died. Disappeared. Shia tradition teaches that, to protect him from persecution by the Abbasid Caliphate, God concealed him from the world. This event is known as the occultation. The hidden imam is believed to remain alive, though unseen, until the end of time. One day, he will return to establish perfect justice across the earth. But until that day arrives, who should govern? For more than 1,000 years, there was no clear answer. Then, in 1979, one man proposed a revolutionary solution. His name was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. His answer became one of the most influential political theories in modern Islamic history. Until the hidden imam returns, an Islamic jurist should govern in his place. This doctrine is known as Wilayat al-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. It became the foundation of the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran after the 1979 revolution. Once you understand that principle, modern Iran suddenly makes much more sense. The supreme leader isn't simply a political leader. His authority is believed to derive from the same chain of religious legitimacy that traces all the way back to Ali himself. A disagreement over Muhammad's successor 14 centuries ago became the constitutional foundation of a modern nation-state. The differences don't stop there. Sunni and Shia Muslims also approach Islamic law, Sharia, in very different ways. Sunni Islam relies primarily on 4 major schools of jurisprudence that developed between the 8th and 9th centuries: the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali schools. Their rulings are based on the Quran, the sayings of the Prophet, and centuries of legal scholarship. Because those foundations are rooted in the early Islamic period, change tends to happen slowly. Shia Islam takes a different approach. Past scholarship remains important, but the guidance of living religious authorities also carries legal weight. The highest-ranking Shia scholars are known as ayatollahs. When a grand ayatollah issues a fatwa, a formal legal opinion, it can shape how millions of believers practice their faith today. Think of it this way. If Sunni jurisprudence is like a library filled with centuries of legal texts, Shia jurisprudence is more like a courtroom where a living judge continues interpreting the law. That distinction has enormous political consequences. In Iran, a single ayatollah can influence the direction of the entire country. The elected president manages the government, but ultimate authority belongs to the supreme leader, a religious figure who isn't elected by the public. For more than 3 decades, that position was held by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Major decisions involving negotiations with the United States, relations with Israel, and support for regional armed groups ultimately rested in his hands. His religious authority outweighed that of any elected official. According to the scenario described in this narrative, Khamenei was later killed during a joint U.S.-Israeli military strike in 2026, after which his son Mojtaba succeeded him. Within this narrative, the succession is presented as another example of history repeating itself, echoing the moment when Muawiyah passed power to his son Yazid nearly 14 centuries earlier. But to understand how this centuries-old religious divide evolved into today's Middle Eastern conflicts, we need to go back once again to the year 1979, Part 4, the rivalry that shaped the modern Middle East. Before the Iranian Revolution, Iran and Saudi Arabia weren't bitter enemies. In fact, they were allies. To understand why, we first need to understand Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the spiritual center of Sunni Islam. Around 85% of the world's Muslims are Sunni, and Islam's 2 holiest cities, Mecca and Medina, are both located inside Saudi Arabia. Backed by enormous oil wealth, Saudi Arabia has spent decades funding Sunni mosques, religious schools, and Islamic institutions across the world. If Iran is the heart of Shia Islam, Saudi Arabia is the heart of Sunni Islam. Yet before 1979, despite belonging to different branches of Islam, both countries stood on the same side of the Cold War. Both were close American allies, both were monarchies, and both shared a common strategic goal, containing Soviet influence across the Middle East. Their religious differences existed, but geopolitical interests mattered more. Then everything changed. After seizing power in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini made a declaration that shook the region. Monarchy is incompatible with Islam. That wasn't simply a theological statement. It was a direct challenge to the Saudi royal family. To Saudi Arabia, the success of Iran's Islamic Revolution represented far more than a change of government. It threatened the legitimacy of every monarchy in the Arab world. Saudi Arabia responded immediately, but instead of confronting Iran only with military power, it doubled down on religion. The kingdom began aggressively promoting Wahhabism, an ultra-conservative interpretation of Sunni Islam. Originating in 18th century Arabia, Wahhabism calls for a return to what it sees as the purest form of early Islam. It also views many Shia beliefs as dangerous religious innovations. Saudi Arabia poured billions of dollars into exporting this ideology. Schools, mosques, universities, religious organizations. Across Africa, Asia, Europe, and beyond. The goal was twofold: to strengthen the kingdom's own religious legitimacy and to prevent Iran's revolutionary ideology from spreading throughout the Sunni world. Iran chose a very different strategy. Rather than competing through religious education alone, it built influence through proxy forces. Iran understood something important. You don't always have to send your own army to fight a war. Instead, it cultivated allies across the Middle East. This network eventually became known as the Shia Crescent, stretching from Iran, through Iraq, into Syria, and finally Lebanon. The regions under strong Shia influence form a crescent-shaped corridor across the map. Along that corridor, Iran supplied money, weapons, training, and political support to allied movements. In Lebanon, Hezbollah grew into one of the region's most powerful armed organizations, with significant backing from Iran's Revolutionary Guard. In Yemen, the Houthi movement received Iranian assistance while launching drones and missiles toward Saudi territory. In Iraq, Iran-backed Shia militias became influential enough to operate alongside official government forces. Without deploying large numbers of its own soldiers, Iran had created a regional network capable of challenging Saudi influence across multiple fronts. It was proxy warfare on a massive scale. Wars designed in Tehran, but fought somewhere else. Yet this rivalry also helped create something neither side fully controlled. Across parts of the Sunni world, anger and instability fueled the rise of extremist organizations such as Al-Qaeda and later ISIS. These groups declared Shia Muslims to be apostates,
traitors to Islam,
and carried out horrific massacres. During ISIS's expansion across Iraq, one massacre alone claimed the lives of as many as 1,700 Shia soldiers and civilians, according to widely reported accounts. Retaliation soon followed. Shia militias attacked Sunni communities. Villages were burned. Civilians suffered. Violence answered violence. Hatred fed more hatred. Then, in March 2023, the world witnessed something few expected. Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to restore diplomatic relations after 7 years. The agreement was signed in Beijing. And the mediator wasn't the United States. It was China. Both governments had practical reasons to compromise. Saudi Arabia wanted stability as it prepared for an economy beyond oil. Iran was struggling under years of international sanctions. For a moment, survival mattered more than ideology. But one handshake couldn't erase 14 centuries of history. The proxy wars never completely disappeared. The deeper religious rivalry remained. And before long, tensions escalated once again. According to the narrative presented here, direct military strikes by the United States and Israel against Iran pulled the region back toward open conflict. The story that began in 632 AD with the death of Muhammad was still echoing across the Middle East nearly 14 centuries later. Sunni, Shia, the same God, the same Quran, the same direction of prayer. Yet two worlds that have rarely stood completely united. Where that story ultimately ends, no one knows. Part 5. One family, three faiths, a conflict that still isn't over. Today, more than half of humanity follows one of the three Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, Islam. All three trace their spiritual roots back to one man, Abraham. They worship the same Creator, honor many of the same prophets, and consider Jerusalem one of the holiest places on earth. Yet for thousands of years, they have also fought some of history's bloodiest wars. How did one family become three civilizations locked in conflict? The answer isn't simple. Part of it is theology. Part of it is politics. Part of it is power. And part of it is something deeply human. Every generation inherited not only its faith, but also its memories, its victories, its tragedies, its sense of injustice. For Jews, Jerusalem is the city of Solomon's temple, the place God promised to Abraham's descendants. For Christians, Jerusalem is where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. For Muslims, it is the city from which Muhammad is believed to have ascended into heaven during the night journey. Three religions, one city, the same sacred ground, each convinced that its own story is inseparable from that place. History only made those convictions stronger. The destruction of the Second Temple, the Crusades, centuries of persecution, the Holocaust, the creation of Israel, the Arab-Israeli wars. None of these erased the older conflicts. Instead, each generation added another layer. Today, nearly 7.5 million Jews and roughly 7.5 million Palestinians continue to live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Many see the same land as their ancestral home. Many pray toward the same holy places. Yet they remember history in profoundly different ways. International courts, peace negotiations, wars, ceasefires. None have fully resolved the conflict. Because this isn't only a dispute over borders, it's also a struggle over identity. Memory